Hello, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts digital event. We would like to ask everyone to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the program, and we will only be accepting questions and comments via the chat window. At the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device, you should be able to see an option for chat. If you click that, it will open the chat window where you can type your questions so that they may be read aloud and answered. Thank you, and enjoy the event. Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this virtual event and presentation are solely those of the individual artists in their personal capacity and are not reflective of nor represent official policy, position, or views of New Jersey City University.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Creative Process series, Conversations with Krystal Sital, an amazing author, moderated by Dr. Edwidge Junta. You're in for a treat today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Junta. She is an award-winning educator as well as an acclaimed writer and editor. Among others, her books include Teaching Italian American Literature, Film, and Popular Culture, and Personal Effects, essays on memoir, teaching, and culture in the work of Louise DeSalvo. Dr. Junta was awarded the OSIA Book Club selection for Italian American Writers on New Jersey and the Educator of the Year Award for the Higher Education category from the Association of Italian American Educators, among others. Edwidge has been bringing us these super insightful conversations that delve into what inspires writers to create their work. So on behalf of myself, I'm Stephanie Chaikin, the Director of the Center for the Arts, and on behalf of Dr. Sue Henderson. Welcome, Dr. Junta. Please start us off.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I am so grateful for this collaboration, and we have done already a few events, and I'm very much looking forward to many others. And you're absolutely right, today is very, very special. So I want to also thank the students who are involved in the English Department Student Events and Publications Committee, with whom I work closely to come up with ideas for events that may be of interest to our community, as well as the Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latinx Studies. We work together here at NJCU. So today is very, very special for me, as it is anytime I have the opportunity to introduce someone that I know personally and with whom I share a history. Krystal Sital was born in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and she's the author of Secrets We Kept, Three Women of Trinidad, a memoir that was published by W.W. Norton, and has been described by critics and reviewers as a deeply resonant, timely, and necessary work of art. Also as a powerful, disturbing narrative in which pain flows out from the page, drenching readers. And a raw and intimate book. And also a powerfully emotive yet agonizingly restless story. Krystal was a finalist in the Pen Fusion Award when she was really, really young, and started publishing striking personal pieces that of great cultural relevance that have really drawn many responses from the readers. She's published in the New York Times Magazine, in Salon, Today's Parent, Lit Hub, Catapult, among many other publications. And she's done all of this while mothering 3 young children and making a beautiful life with her partner here in New Jersey and cooking some incredible meals. I can testify. Krystal completed her MFA at Hunter College, where she was the recipient of the Hertog Fellowship, a very prestigious fellowship. And there she completed a memoir thesis. After her graduation, she expanded it and she produced the book, the manuscript that became Secrets We Kept. But once upon a time, before Hunter College, Krystal was an undergraduate student right here at New Jersey City University. And here we are always, always happy to welcome her back. So welcome, Krystal. And I'm really very much looking forward to being in conversation with you, and also to hear the questions the students and others in the audience want to ask you. So I'm going to start straight with the first question. When I was thinking of a title for this conversation, I wrote to you, how about all the stories we must tell? And you immediately said, sounds good to me. So my question is, why do you feel compelled to tell story? And I also would like for you to tell us if what inspires you to write is the same thing that drives you to write.
Can you say that last thing again, Eddie? What aspires me to?
What inspires you to write? Is it the same thing that drives you to write?
Okay.
It's a subtle difference, but I'm curious.
First, can I say thank you so much to everyone for all the hard work, for bringing this to fruition. I'm really excited. I mean, I wish we could be all in person, all together in person, but that will happen hopefully soon enough. And especially to be back at NJCU. That's you guys hold a special place in my heart. So I did say, yeah, let's go ahead with this title because it felt like exactly what I have been doing. And now I can look back on it and say, oh, that was my writing career, right? That was just the trajectory of my journey to publishing this first book. I feel like I'm compelled to write different stories for different reasons. So when I write, and I know we're going to discuss the New York Times article later on, when I decided to write that, it was in 2016, and I decided to write that because Trump had just been announced as our president-elect, and I really wanted to remind people. I had been sitting on this. It felt like a story now because I had lived past it. I had thought about it. I had reflected on it. It felt like now if I put words to paper, it would be a story, and the story had to have a purpose outside of myself. And so I thought, if I'm going to write about when immigration agents came knocking on my door, this was the perfect time to do it because I needed to remind people of their humanity. I needed to remind people that there are a lot of people who are scared, and they had, they had lots of good reasons to be scared for their safety. And so that's why I wrote that one story. Now, why I wrote the book is that something completely different. I felt like I needed to honor not just the women in my family, but I really wanted to honor the women in the Caribbean and women worldwide. I want to honor their voices and let them know that all their stories can be told. And there's never, one story doesn't cover an entire region or an entire country. We need multiple stories like these all the time. So I think that would be the long answer to your question. And I'm thinking on this other one. So what inspires me to write? Is it the same as?
What drives you to write? What gets you to the desk every morning? We talk a lot about the power of inspiration. Is inspiration what carries you? Is there something else?
That's a good question for right now because I'm particularly inspired to write. These past few weeks I've been writing a lot. My children actually inspire me to write a lot. They've been so involved in helping me celebrate my book the last couple of years. I take them to events. They're so, the way that they look at me, I just want to freeze that and hold it in my heart forever because I overhear my daughter now because she's home. I hear her talking about me on her Zoom calls, and she tells everybody, my mommy is an author. She's very famous. And granted, I'm really not that famous, but she thinks the world of me. And the topics that I write about are very female-centered. They're very women-centered. women's issues, health, bodies, all these things that I want to write about, whether it's a nonfiction form or fiction, whether it takes the form of fiction, I'm always writing around women. And it's not just for women, it's for everybody, but I am very centered on writing about women's issues. And they inspire me to write because I want to change the world that they're going to be living in. And what actually gets me to the desk is I can't not write. And I've heard people say that over and over again. And I realize that that's true. If I want to be happy, I write. Writing really does that for me. And seeing my work come to fruition means a lot for me, but it means a lot more when I connect other people and it's out in the world and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Thank you, Krystal. Well, you mentioned both the secrets we kept and your essay when immigration agents came knocking. And I know I would like for you to read excerpts from each today. So maybe, I'll let you choose which one you want to start with, and then we'll do a few more questions, and then you can read from the other.
You're just going to let me choose? Okay.
Yes. Or do you want me to tell you?
Yes, tell me.
Okay. Well,
I miss you telling me what to do.
Okay. Well, you are the only one. So why don't you read from the essay first?
Okay. So I'm only going to read the first few paragraphs of when immigration agents came knocking. On that particular evening back in 2003, my parents were in the car together returning home from work. My mother was a babysitter, my father an electrician, when they noticed 3 men in suits reading the labels on the mailboxes in front of our building. This was on the urban streets of New Jersey against a backdrop of dilapidated buildings, and they immediately assumed who it was. Go in your bedroom and hide, my mother hissed over the phone. Immigration is here. Do not open the door. My younger sister, Kim, was only 12, and I was 16, a junior in high school. When I relayed the message to her, we both grinned. Our family had a dark sense of humor, and even though we were residing in the United States illegally, this sounded like just the kind of prank she would play on us. Chris, she said, this is not a joke. I'm sitting outside with your father. They are going upstairs right now. Hide. Her voice was too serious, too worried. Not a tremor of a laugh vibrated in her words. So I shut my sister in our bedroom, turned off all the lights, and locked the windows. We lived in a 3rd floor walk-up in Bayonne. It would take them a couple of minutes to get up there, so I stood behind the door of our apartment and peered through the peephole. I could hear footsteps on the wooden stairs, not the weary ascension of the old Egyptian lady and her husband who lived across the hallway, or the skip of the little Puerto Rican boy below us, or the cheerful whistle of the African-American woman on the 1st floor. It was when the tops of their heads floated above the railing that I really believed my mother's words. Having gone through the motions of locking the apartment down, I was still hoping it was all an elaborate gag. I felt the unlawfulness of our status in this country acutely. As far as I knew, they could and had every right to remove us from our apartment and send us back to our country, Trinidad and Tobago. The 3 came, one behind the other, down the narrow corridor. I trapped a breath in my chest and stepped away from the door just as the one in front raised a fist to rap his knuckles where my face had been. I'll stop there.
Thank you for the beautiful reading. And I just want to tell you that you're messing up all my questions because you are talking about so many interesting things, and just listening to you read, I want to ask other questions. So I'm going to just drop my script. So this is such a beautifully constructed personal essay with memoiristic elements, and you really masterfully capture the experience of the young Krystal and the perspective of the older narrator. That is such a central challenge for writers who are working in the genre memoir, but also the personal essay, to differentiate between the two, but also to create these two entities in a way that they are connected. Can you share some of your strategies or some of the challenges that you have encountered and how you have addressed them in this piece or in other pieces?
I can talk about, actually, I can talk about all my memoir pieces. I have gone, it has been simple because I found something that works. If I want to be in the present and then access the past and have the past feel like the present, I use simple past tense because I feel like that allows me to go forward and backward. It gives me the mobility and the flexibility to do that. And it still has that feeling of it feels like present tense, but it's not really, because in present tense I find it can be present tense is great. I have nothing against all the other tenses. What I'm saying is that simple past tense gives you the flexibility to move around a lot. And I find it really helpful to do it when writing memoir pieces. I'm even doing it in my fiction right now because I like to be able to settle into the consciousness of the character and for you to get to know me very quickly, because that's what it is, right? In that one story, I have to give you all the information that you need to know very quickly, but then also it's short, it's 900 words. And so the arc it goes very quickly like this. The arc goes very fast. So you get a lot of information, but I still have to keep you moving so that you're interested, you're invested, you want to know what's going to happen. So I think details are really important. I give you all the little details about my apartment so that you understand that this is home to me and that you can apply that to yourself. What if there was an invasion in your own home? These are the questions that I wanted the reader to ask and to put themselves not just in my place, but in the place of so many people that this has already happened to.
Thank you so much. I hope my memoir students, as well as my students who are working on personal essays, are paying attention and taking notes. I'm actually pretty sure that they are. So you have talked about secrets we kept and feeling compelled to write not just your story, but to really recognize the stories of the women of your family and Caribbean women. And there's really this sense of ethical responsibility to create a space for the stories. So you know, very often people think of memoir as a story that is just about the writer. Secrets We Kept is a larger story. It's a story that moves across time and space, and even in terms of the key characters. You're really bringing to stage other women. You are one of these women, as a subtitle specifies. Could you talk about what went the process of putting together a story where you were not the sole protagonist, and how you found your place in the story while trying to open up the stage and invite these powerful women characters to play such a central role?
So if I'm going to be completely honest, I think it helped that I didn't know what I was doing half the time, and I didn't understand what I was doing for a very long time. And that's partly because I didn't have very many examples. There are not a lot of memoirs out there that have multiple perspectives, that write it from the third person, from another person's point of view. And I didn't find one until I was in grad school. And then after I read it, I felt, after seeing something similar to what I was trying to do done, then it helped me decide better what I wanted to do with my own work. So when I worked with you, Eddie, I started writing this story. I thought, this is fiction. I'm going to make this story fiction because I'm writing it from my mother's perspective. And then I took your class. I discovered what memoir was. That was key, is that I didn't know that I could publish this story as nonfiction. once you open that door for me and I started thinking about it in all these different ways, I had to engage with, okay, the ethical parts of memoir, how much, all of it needs to be true. So how do I go about writing this story that's not in my perspective? It takes place during a time before I was born, but I am familiar with the landscape because I did grow up there. So I think having that anchor of knowing the physical place and making sure that I did go back there to familiarize myself with the landscape, even though it had changed because there had been decades in between some of these stories, that helped. And then really doing interviews over and over again. That's what took this book 10 years to hit, to come from the very beginning to the bookstores, is that I needed to continuously do interviews, and every little question was really important. So I would call my grandmother up and I would call my mother up and I would ask them the same questions over and over again. And as they were talking, ask them to clarify something. And yet at the same time, it's a fine balance because I have to also know when to just let them talk. And I just have to listen. Did I answer that question? I don't know. I didn't write it down.
Absolutely, absolutely. You actually reminded me of an oral history interview I did with my grandmother when she was in her 90s, and I had in my mind this determination I was going to find out about this particular story, and so she kept talking about other things, but I kept trying to bring her to my story. And when I listened to the recording, I could have kicked myself because there were stories that she wanted to tell. So I really appreciate the comment that you made about how the balance that you must achieve when you are interviewing people in your family between looking for a story and letting the story emerge. And the work that you did in Secrets We Kept is so magnificent that it really shows that you were very, very successful in the work. So I want to remind our audience that very soon we're going to be opening up for questions. Please post your questions on chat, and then our wonderful Emily Sierra, she will look at the questions and we'll try to ask as many questions as possible. But Chris, it's time to read from Secrets We Kept.
I'm just going to read a few paragraphs from the beginning. It's let me see. Our stories are rooted in the Caribbean, our histories woven into its bougainvillea trellises with their paper-thin petals, the lone road winding round and round the mountain like a serpent strangling a tree, coiling up and down again to the virgin beaches untouched by hotels and tourists, crowds and money, the foliage so dense and green it's a prismatic shade of malachite, almost as though the vegetation itself is choking the life out of the island. This is a place where the intoxicating aroma of curry drapes itself around you in layers, where bake and shark sandwiches are fried on the beach, where the main ingredient for every dish is the heady bandanya, our word for culantro. No, not cilantro. It is much stronger than that. Here, people devour every part of every animal from the eyeballs to the guts and lick their fingers and pat their bellies when they are through. The island can be traversed in a day, less than that if you know what you're doing. A mere 10 degrees north of the equator, it is a place of heat, so intense it can drive a person insane, and yet the waves curling against the seashore deep in the valleys, between the mountains and the luminous rivers that seem to fall from the sky, itself can quench that same person's soul for eternity. Trinidad is our fears and our loves. There we discovered our beings. We dug deep and planted our roots, assuming we would never leave, sucking on the armored cascadura with its silver-plated shell, devouring the sweet flesh beneath the only fish, the legend says, ties you to the land forevermore, smacking our lips when we were done. We never thought we would have to leave this place, since our mothers and fathers planted our placentas beneath mango and plum, pomegranate and coconut trees. But in the end, we choose to flee. We leave. We do. With no intention of turning back, we embrace America for everything Trinidad was not.
I saw such a beautiful and deeply moving reading, and the power of your writing is not only you captures with such exquisite detail the specificity of the place that you left, but in the way in which you capture the emotions and the relationship to the places that your family left, you really speak to anyone who ever left a place. So thank you for the very moving reading. I'm going to ask one more question, and then Emily, get ready with the questions from our audience. So I'm teaching women in literature this semester, and my students are reading Secrets That We Kept. And one of the assignments that I give the students is an author presentation on one of the authors that we are reading. And I really want students to focus on aspects of the life of the author, the publication history, the reception. And what really interests me, and what we are trying to do is try to unveil, pull the curtain and see what's behind the book. When the book comes in our hands, it's this beautifully packaged, pristine, beautiful cover artifact. And so we don't think of all the messy work, all the labor, the anxiety, the suffering, the dirty dishes, the procrastination, the really years and years of work that go into the process. So next week, actually, one of my students is giving a presentation about you. So my question to you is, what kind of things do we need to know about the author of Secrets We Kept?
Oh my goodness, Eddie, no. Can you make it more specific than that?
Okay, pick 3 things that we need to know about what was going on, the work of producing this wonderful memoir.
You mean what was going on in my life as I was working on
related? No, I will not violate boundaries. No, but related to the making of the book. What goes into the making of the book?
Okay.
And you could talk about your writing schedule, or an editor tell you to rewrite, choices of titles, cover, the juggling, whatever you want. It's your choice. Okay. Here we have the privilege of having the author speaking to us.
So what goes into the making of this book? A lot, so much that I can't possibly satisfactorily answer that question even in an hour, but I will try to give you a flavor of it. So I worked on the chapter that starts with Arya sits crouching at the side of the half wooden, half concrete house in this book. That was one of the first lines that I ever wrote for this book, and I wrote it for your class, right, Eddie? That became one of the chapters. That became like the foundational chapter for this book. And so everything I did was built around it, right? There was I initially wanted it to be the opening line of the book, because if anybody knows my personality, it's loud, right? So I wanted to go in loud, but it didn't work. And I think I had to come to learn that. I had to come to understand the structure of a story and understand how a reader enters a story, especially if it's something that's very unfamiliar, and the kind of relationship that I wanted to have with my reader for a book like this that I saw as very tender. So I started that there. I built on it, right? And I had, essentially, when I was done working on my thesis at NJCU, I think I had 2 narratives and I had to choose one. So I chose one to work on in graduate school. I continued to build on that. Once I graduated from my MFA program, I had a writing partnership with, I mean, I always had a writing partnership with Angel Eduardo, who I know is in the audience right now. And he is my constant, right? So we are always talking. And I mean, really long conversations Angel and I have via text or on the phone. And he doesn't have to read everything I write. I can just tell him, right? But having that kind of partnership with someone, I think sitting in a classroom and your professor saying, you know, writing partnerships are important, and then really discovering how important they are outside of the classroom, especially when you're done with school, is something that is totally different. You understand that you need someone who has that level of drive and passion, and that you work together, you bounce off of each other really well, you have someone you can talk with ideas about, you can voice things that you can't possibly get to in your journal, and someone's listening. That's another thing, keeping a writing journal. That I will get to that. I'll make a note of how important a writing journal is in a sec. But having a writing partnership would prove to be one of the most important things for me, graduating from NJCU and then graduating from Hunter. So I was in a writing group with two other women, and I worked on the book, and they were not working. We weren't working at the same pace. So I ended up finishing. I was close. I was close to being done. Now, what's happening in my life personally is I was pregnant. I had a little girl who was born 8 weeks early. And so the first year of her life was really difficult for us because we didn't know if she was going to survive. And for that year, I did nothing. I didn't do any writing. I couldn't because I was tending to a little human being, and I didn't want her to die. So after that year, I find out I'm pregnant again. That was another loop. I did not see that one coming. And I told my spouse, I said, okay, I need you to take a week off of work, and we are going to treat writing like it is my job, because it is my job, right? And for 7 days, because I was close, but I wasn't there yet to having a full draft. I said, for 7 days, I'm going to wake up, and from 9 to 5, no one is going to bother me. And he said, okay, because that is the kind of person he is. And that's why the book is dedicated to him, because that's the kind of person he is. And I did it in a week. I finished up a draft. I keep saying draft because the book is not done yet, right? I finished up a draft of this manuscript, and then I had to rework it again. So in my own time, I continued to rework it. I sent it to Angel. I sent it to a couple other of my friends, parts of it. And we worked on it in ways that I could get it polished enough that I would send it off to an agent. So something really lucky happened to me along the way. There was this PEN award that was happening, and it was for unpublished manuscripts. And I submitted most of the manuscripts for the award. I got a lot of attention because I was a finalist for it. I got a lot of attention from publishing houses, agents, editors. A lot of people were interested because I guess they sent all this stuff out, and it's PEN America. And I ended up signing with my agent because of this award, and the book was ready within 6 months. She had sold it. So that is the compressed, like the really compressed version. Because like I said, it took me 10 years to work on this book, do interviews all over and over again. Now I wanted to go back to journals, and I want to go back because I'm working on a novel now, and I just flipped to the front of my writing journal. And I looked at the date. I won't tell you the date because how long it's taking me to write this other book now. And then I'm digging through all my journals, and I found recently the very first journal that I worked for this, and the book was initially called Incantations, and I could completely forgotten about that. The Secrets We Kept was initially called Incantations, and it's a slim little book, and I think I have it dated. I wish I had pulled it out so I could show it to you. but it's dated from when I first started working around like Eddie's class and then moving on to Hunter. But in it is my process. And I see that my process in one thing, in one project is really different from my process in another project. And in between writing, sometimes I take a break from writing. I noticed that I needed a break from working on the book to work on something else, whether it's an article or an essay or, you know, just a story, something other than the major project, because you can't only focus on that all of the time. I know there's more. I know there's titles. You said, Eddie. I don't know. Did I hit 3? I think I hit 3.
I think you gave us a lot. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think you just really gave us such a sense of the reality of writing, and you know, and I think it's really important to think of writing not simply as a creative and intellectual act that happens somewhere in an ethereal world. It's really the hard work of doing it every day and also living our lives. And so I think you really captured that experience very eloquently. So thank you so much for that. So Emily, I'm going to turn to you now. And yes, we have, yes, absolutely. We have questions. Just write your questions on chat and Emily is going to be reading that.
All right. Yeah. So I have been keeping track of everyone's wonderful comments, wonderful questions. We're getting a lot of storytelling in the chat too. We've been paying attention. So hopefully we keep a log of that. And I just have to say too that one of the first events that I ever went to at NJCU was when Krystal went to NJCU and read from Secrets We Kept. So this is a very full circle moment for me. So this has been a huge treat to listen to, and everyone has been super inspired by a lot of what you've been saying. And because of that, we're getting some really great questions too. So the first question...
I'm sorry, Emily. So was that, I think I fed Angel in front of everybody and asked him to get food from the book.
Yes, that was the event. It was my first event, going to NJCU, and I was like, wow, this is great. I can really get into this. This is awesome. So Peggy has a question about a more process-orientated question. So Peggy wrote, you have a very lyrical way of writing, even from experiences that you didn't personally live through. What is your process for creating a sensory-driven scenes, and how do you put yourself into a scene of someone else's memory?
Okay, can you repeat it one more time?
So the main question is, what is your process for creating a sensory-driven scene, and how do you put yourself into a scene of someone else's memory?
So if I'm writing a scene for myself, if we're specifically talking about Secrets We Kept, right? I think one of the things that just emerged naturally is that Trinidad is a very sensory-oriented place. And so I think that came about very naturally. I never tried to force senses when writing, because if I'm writing about somewhere where the senses are a bit muted, I tune into that and I write about the senses being more muted. I acknowledge that. I tip my hat to that. I'm not going to force something to be there. Now, what I think is really interesting is that how do I then access what I didn't experience? That's an excellent question. It's by listening. So I had to listen, really, really, really listen to the women in the Caribbean. I did a lot of interviews outside of my grandmother and my mother too, but I was telling their stories. Essentially what I ended up doing, not essentially, what I ended up doing is I was telling their stories specifically. So I listened to my grandmother, and when I listened to her, when I interviewed her, I only just let her talk and let her go at length. And what I learned is that these women are incredible storytellers. I mean, I cannot ever live up to how they storytell, and so one way that I did that is by listening to the things that they spoke about. And then I visited the places that they spoke about. I revisited. I lived there, and I knew these places from my childhood, but then I also needed to go back and see it through an adult lens, see it through my eyes as a mother, as an adult, as someone who's left this place, as someone who's coming back to this place, to understand their journey also of, you know, leaving and then looking back. So I think really that's what it came down to, is really paying attention to the things that they kept repeating, to the images and the smells that they talked about a lot. They were probably very immersed in their own senses, and then I tapped into that through them.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially particularly about, yeah, listening specifically to the people that you're writing about, because that's their stories too. And so it's kind of that meshing of your stories and their stories together. And it really creates something very beautiful and very poignant. We actually do have a question specifically about that interviewing process. Zovian writes, what was the interview process like with your mother? Was it difficult for you to attach the emotion in her answers to your writing? Especially, yeah, even when I was writing some of my own memoir, the idea of interviews kind of seemed very daunting. And so the emotional aspect of like, what is the emotional like element of these are very raw stories that you're writing? And so how did you approach that in your interview process with your mother and also with your grandmother?
Well, with my mom and my grandmother, so I think from hearing it said out loud and also from just saying it today, I may switch my language a little bit and have them be more, they are interviews because I am asking questions, but essentially they're conversations, right? Because we are talking, we're sharing, we're going back and forth. I mean, I'm very intent in my questions, so I can't take the interview part out of it, but if you sat at the table with us when we were talking, and a lot of these conversations happened around the kitchen table. So that's something that I noticed. It always happened around food. And I think that's worth mentioning because I write about those scenes in the book, but I think it's worth mentioning because food is something very special. We tend to let our guards down around food. And if you think about how we break bread together, stories naturally emerge that way. It just happened that they felt very comfortable in a kitchen or in a dining room and just sitting down and allowing themselves to pour their stories out to me over food. Now the interview process with my mom, part of me wanted to have something to look back on, something tangible, because I don't have very many tangible things. Photographs, I mean, some people have tons and tons of photographs. We don't have a lot of those things, especially moving from one country to another. A lot of our stuff is lost in the process. So I tried taping her one day while we were talking. And my mom, we both have accents, you know, we speak like we're from the islands. And the minute I hit record, she started talking like an American. And I thought, what the hell is this? And then she kept eyeing the recorder as we were talking. And so I go, that was the first and the last. I said, I'm not doing this again. I'm turning it off, Mom. Okay. And we were talking about a scene that we had already talked about, by the way. So it wasn't really new information. I was just clarifying some stuff. And so I go, never mind. It's fine. This is just not going to work for me. There were different things that I had to try out. I tried taking notes in front of them. And there's always, I think my grandmother, not as much. She doesn't really care as much. She kind of just talks. She lives in her own world. Her voice just takes over the whole room. And she has this presence. It's really comforting. And even though she's telling these really violent, horrific stories, right? She manages to be the one who's comforting me. And the writing didn't work either. So I ruled out typing in front of them immediately. And I just had conversations with them. And when I was done, I made sure I always had something nearby where I could just go sequester myself in a bathroom somewhere and write everything down that I possibly could. And that became part of the journal for Secrets We Kept, is that I could continuously go back because these are the words that they said. These were the dialogue that I would eventually use for the book that kept coming up, and we would use between us. Now, did I answer your question? What was it like to interview? What was the emotional element like? Okay, so the emotional element is really important. I took myself out of the equation. I think I really needed to do that to respect their memories and their emotions. I wasn't there then, and I had a very that became part of the story also, because we're a lot of the story is around my grandfather too, and how he acted and how he behaved to them, and I had a special relationship with him. So how that part of the storyline is, how can I understand and allow these women to tell their stories in this space without overshadowing that I thought that he was a good person. And so I just let them be. I wasn't present for this. These were their emotions. I wrote their stories like it was theirs, and I didn't allow myself to go in and interfere with the story or add an emotional layer or try to manipulate the reader in any way.
That was so full of,
that was long-winded, sorry.
no, but it was so full of so many good things. I was just like, wow. I was like, that was very full. Especially I can really relate to, especially like your grandmother's voice is kind of be like all encompassing. And just like, that would set me like a little bit of chills. And even keeping that voice, all these voices of these two very prominent women in your lives, keeping them genuine. I think that's a question that comes up a lot in memoir is, okay, this is my voice, but how do I let the voice of all these other people in my life, how do I keep that genuine? How do I keep that real to them? And I think that's a really good idea of just stepping back, not even necessarily recording, but taking down like those meticulous notes, journaling, big emphasis on journaling here. But keeping track of those notes, keeping track of everything to kind of help guiding the writing. Keeps it very organic, keeps it very like.
By the way, guys, I'm not lying about the journal. Okay, I did not. I would like to underscore, especially for those taking a writing class right now, that I didn't appreciate journaling enough while I was a student. And it wasn't until after I'd graduated my MFA program, by the way, that I really started understanding my relationship to a journal. So this is my journal right now for the current book that I'm working on. And I mean, like, I'm deep into the process of journaling. Okay, I'm not lying to you.
Everyone in the memoir class is taking note of how that journal looks.
And have it be something really plain so that you don't have to live up to anything, right? It's a plain notebook.
Right. So kind of even keeping up with this, Cedric asked a question specifically about how did it feel to dig deep into your history and into your heritage? So I'm sure that a lot of outside research on top of the interviewing process, I'm sure there was a lot of also outside research that went into this. And he also kind of had a follow-up question that was, did you receive any negativity about the memoir for exposing what life can really be like? So you can kind of choose which one you want to answer first and how you want to approach that.
So the first part is, what did it feel like to dig deeply into
your history and your heritage?
It was very interesting digging as deeply as I did because I learned a lot along the way. I think that's the surprising and really fun thing about it, is that I had to write about this one Indian celebration that was happening at the time for my grandmother, and she said the name, but then I didn't know too much about it because I hadn't celebrated it growing up. And then so I got to do fun research, and I got lost in the research about what Kartik was and understanding the colors and where they did it, and visiting the place that they did it also, because I had been there as a child, but I didn't go for this one celebration. And listening to her talk about the landscape and seeing how that had changed from her time to my mom's to mine. And with the whole, speaking about emotional elements of writing a memoir, let's talk about some of the negative things that can happen, right? It won't necessarily happen to everybody, but I knew that this was a real thing for me, is writing about skeletons in your closet, right? Writing about dirty laundry, writing about these things. When you come from a large family like mine, I come from a really big family. I'm talking extended. I grew up with a lot of cousins. I have a lot of aunts and uncles on both sides. And one of the things is that I finally voiced that I was working on this book. And the first thing that one of my aunts says is, I'm going to sue you if you mention my name in the book. Her son, my cousin, is a lawyer. So I did get a little nervous, but it didn't deter me from telling the story. And at that point, I didn't have an agent yet. I was just saying that I was working on a book. But because they knew it was nonfiction and because they knew it was about the family, that became something that everybody bristled about. I doubt they've read it to this day. But part of the process of publishing a book is that it does get vetted by a lawyer, multiple lawyers sometimes, just to be safe. And so the fallout is that no one on my mom's side of the family speaks to me anymore after publishing this book. I'm thankful that they still speak to my grandmother and my mom, because I feel like they still need that in their lives. I'm not gonna say I do miss my family. I always will, because I grew up with them. But this book was so important to my mom and to my grandmother. They understood why we went on this journey together. And some people say to me all the time when I talk about Secrets, you kept saying, "Oh, you're so brave for writing this story." And I always say, I'm not the brave one, because they are the ones who came forward, and they were the ones who went forward with me to tell this story. And I find what they did to be incredible, and I bow down to them. And this is part of my way of honoring that. But there is a fallout that can happen, and part of that fallout for me was that I lost half of my family.
No, yeah, I think this is an important discussion to have too, about like, once you have this body of work written and it's put out there, what does happen? If there are any repercussions? And I know everyone's story is a little bit different with this, but it is definitely saddening to know that part of your family wasn't necessarily open to hearing those stories, but the fact that it resonates so much with such a larger audience, to get those voices and those stories from you, your grandmother, and your mother as well out there, it really definitely hits home. And I think for the last part of this, one of the last questions that we're gonna get to, kind of goes more into the emotional side of things. Rachel Amora asked, was there any part of the book that you had to step away from as you wrote it? Sometimes writing can stir up emotions. I know other people kind of had questions about the general writing process, like the physicality of it. So can you speak to that, about the emotional aspects of writing about things that really can stir up a lot of really heavy emotions?
No, I did not have to step away from this book at all. It was like a fire lit under my ass. I'm sorry, can I say ass? But I had a fire, and I just had to keep going. But that's not to say that everybody needs to do the same thing. I will give you the reason why I was able to keep going. I did not live through a lot of the violence and a lot of the trauma that I write about. And when I teach, I focus a lot of, not a lot, but I talk a bit about re-traumatizing yourself, right? And I use a scale, and I ask, because we write memoir, a lot of what's written in memoir, it's traumatic. So I have a scale when I'm working with some of my students, and it's on a scale of 0 to 10. Rate your trauma. 0 being you feel nothing at all towards it. 10 being if you think about it, it viscerally upsets you, right? It sends you back to a really dark place. Now, if my students are somewhere between an 8 and a 10, I say, you're not ready to write, right? What I think you need is to work through this. Maybe therapy might be the best solution for you right now. But I work with students who rate their trauma somewhere 0 to 7. And I write about traumatic things too that happened to me. So I'm familiar with re-traumatizing myself when writing. But for this book specifically, because I did not live through those things, I felt like I was merely recording a lot of the stories that were being given to me. I didn't have that, I don't want to say I didn't have any personal connection, because I did. This happened to women in my family. And so I was upset, but I was recording. There was a very different relationship that I was able to encompass and embody while I was working on this book. So that's one of the reasons I felt like I could just keep going through. Now, that said, I held a lot of my emotions at bay because I was just listening a lot of the times. I was allowing them to process and work through some things, understanding that they can't always go back to some of the places that I asked them to go. And I became much better at understanding when that was happening in the process, because you just get a feel for things as you go along the way. And I'm learning so much as I'm doing it. Once the book was done and it was out in the world, I did a reading months later. And I'm reading from this one part that I have read from over and over again. Okay, and I stop and I start crying in front of an audience because it finally hit me. I finally felt like I was allowed to feel for my mom and to feel for my grandmother, because for so long I had been focused on the writing and the storytelling and all the technical parts of it to just get it to where I needed it to be. And then once it was there, there was just this release, and it happened publicly. I have mixed emotions about how that happened, but it did. So, there are a lot of emotional elements that are involved depending on the story that you're telling. But before you end, I had happened to see in the chat, because there was a lot going on, but somebody had asked in the chat if I was going to write a children's book. And I did want to answer that question because my eyes landed on it. Because my kids have said to me, "Oh, mommy, you write books for adults. Why can't you write books for us?" So they have the language now to ask me this, right? I have written a children's book. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I think, do I want to write more? Maybe. Yeah, I think I could write a couple more. But yes, I plan to write for children because I love little human beings. Okay, I think they're brilliant. Okay, and they represent so much to us. So I do plan on writing more. I just don't know what I'm going to do with it yet.
Thank you so much, Emily, for just leading the discussion so beautifully. And Chris, it's such a joy and a pleasure just to watch you in action. You have played such an instrumental role in building the writing community of NJCU, and it's a community that we trust will keep growing, and so that you can come back and share your work with you, and for these writers who are at the beginning of their journey, it's so inspiring just to listen to you. I know for me, it's incredible. It fills me with pride, with joy, and really a lot of faith in the future, which we really need right now.
Oh, we do, right? Yes, we do.
And you will come back to present your children's book here, right?
To adults, you want me to present my children?
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, some of the students who are right now in the audience are for my class, Dark Stories for Young Adults. That's what we are reading when immigration agents came knocking. So,
oh, I love it. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, and thank you to the NJCU Center for the Arts for just helping us have this beautiful event. To everyone who came, your beautiful comments, your attention, be inspired by our wonderful Krystal Sital. Thank you, Emily and Stephanie. Back to you. Oh, you. And just one last thing I want to say. If you don't have a copy, what is it, of this beautiful book, order it and read it. You won't regret it.
Yes, we'll put it in the chat of right here in the chat is where you can order the books. Definitely everyone must buy this. And thank you so very much, Krystal and Eddie and Emily. It's so inspirational to hear you. It gives us voice to start looking at our stories and be able to have the courage to put it out there, hopefully as inspirationally as you. And we thank you very much. And special thanks also to Anna Carhart, our theater manager, Justin Tinker, our technical director, and Sabrina Sabalo, our box office manager and Zoom maven. Thank you everyone for being here today. We hope that you continue to come and join us for our next programs next week, Tuesday, November 24th at 5:30 p.m. Dr. Junta will be interviewing 3 graduates from NJCU on a program called The Roads to Publishing. And so you can sign up at njcu.edu/arts. And we hope you have an amazing day. We'll leave the chat open for a minute so you can copy down where to purchase Krystal's books. And yeah, take the inspiration into your day.